조지 오웰 1984 The Haiti rose to its climax. The voice of Goldstein had become an actual ship's blade, and for an instant the pace changed into that of a ship. Then the thick face melted into the figure of a Eurasian soldier who seemed to be advancing, huge and terrible, his submachine gun roaring and seeming to spring out of the surface of the screen, so that some of the people in the front row actually flinched backward in their seat. But in the same moment, drawing a deep sigh of relief from everybody, the hostile figure melted into the face of Big Brother. Black-haired, black mustached, pure of power, and mysterious calm, and so vast that it almost filled up the screen. Nobody heard the Big Brother was saying. It was merely a few words of encouragement, the sort of words that are uttered in the din of battle, not distinguishable individually, but restoring confidence by the fact of being spoken. Then the face of Big Brother faded away again, and instead the city slogan of the party stood out, the bold capitals. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. But the face of Big Brother seemed to persist for several seconds on the screen, as though the impact that it had made on everyone's eyeballs were too vivid to wear off immediately. The little sandy-haired woman flung herself forward over the back of the chair in front of her. With tremulous murmur would sound like, "My savior." She extended her arms toward the screen. Then she buried her face in her hands. It was apparent that she was uttering a prayer. At this moment, the entire group of people broke into a deep, slow, rhythmical chant of B, 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 over and over again, very slowly, with a long pause between the first B and the second, a heavy, murmurous sound, somehow curiously savage, in the background of which one seemed to hear the stamp of naked feet and the throbbing of dum, dum. For perhaps as much as 30 seconds they kept it up. It was a refrain that was often heard in moments of overwhelming emotion. Partly, it was sort of a hymn to the wisdom and majesty of Big Brother, but still more it was an act of self-hypnosis, a deliberate drowning of consciousness by means of rhythmic noise. Winston's entrails seemed to grow cold. In the 2 minutes hate, he could not help sharing in the general delirium. But this subhuman chanting of B, 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 B always filled him with horror. Of course, he chanted with the rest. It was impossible to do otherwise. To dissemble your feeling, to control your face, to do what everyone else was doing, was an instinctive reaction. But there was a space of a couple of seconds during which the impression in his eyes might conceivably have betrayed him. And it was exactly at this moment that the significant thing happened, if indeed it did happen. Momentarily, he caught O'Brien's eye. O'Brien had stood up. He had taken off his spectacles and was in the act of resettling them on his nose with his characteristic gesture. But there was a fraction of a second when their eyes met, and for as long as it took to happen, Winston knew. Yes, he knew that O'Brien was thinking the same thing as himself. An unmistakable message had passed. It was as though their two minds had opened and the thoughts were flowing from one to into the other through their eyes. I am with you. O'Brien seemed to be saying to him, I know precisely what you are feeling. I know all about your contempt, your hatred, your disgust. But don't worry, I am on your side. And then the flash of intelligence was gone, and O'Brien's face was as inscrutable as everybody else's. That was all, and he was already uncertain whether it had happened. Such incidents never had any score. All that they did was to keep alive in him the belief or hope that others besides himself were the enemy of the party. Perhaps the rumor of vast underground conspiracies were true. After all, perhaps the Brotherhood really existed. It was impossible, in spite of the endless arrest and confession and execution, to be sure that the Brotherhood was not simply a myth. Some days he believed in it, some days not. There was no evidence, only fleeting glimpse that might mean anything or nothing. Snatch of overheard conversation, paint scribbles of laboratory walls once even. When two strangers met, a small movement of the hand which had looked as though it might be a thing of recognition. It was all guesswork. Very likely he had imagined everything. He had gone back to his cubicle without looking at O'Brien again. The idea of following up their momentary contact hardly crossed his mind. It would have been inconceivably dangerous, even if he had known how to set about doing it. For a second, 2 seconds, they had exchanged an equivocal glance, and then that was the end of the story. But when that was a memorable event in the locked loneliness in which one had to live. Winston roused himself and sat up straight. He let out a belch. The gin was rising from his stomach. His eyes refocused on the page. He discovered why he said helplessly, musing. He had also been writing, as though by automatic action, and it was no longer the same cramped, awkward handwriting as before. His pen had slid voluptuously over the smooth paper, printing in large neat capital. Down with big brother, 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 over and over again, feeling helpless. He could not help feeling a twinge of panic. It was absurd, since the writing of those particular words was not more dangerous than the initial act of opening the diary. But for a moment he was tempted to tear out the spoiled page and abandon the enterprise altogether. But he did not do so, however, because he knew that it was useless. Whether he rose down with big brother, or whether he refrained from riding it, made no difference. Whether he went on with the diary, or whether he did not go on with it, made no difference. The thought police would get him just the same. He had committed, would still have committed, even if he had never set pen to paper. The essential crime that contained all others itself. Thought crime, they called it. Thought crime was not a thing that could be concealed forever. You might dodge successfully for a while, even for years, but sooner or later, they were bound to get you. It was always at night. The arrest invariably happened at night. The sudden jerk out of sleep, a rough hand shaking your shoulder, the lights glaring in your eyes, the ring of hard face around the bed. In the vast majority of cases, there was no trial, no report of the arrest. People simply disappointed, always during the night. Your name People simply disappeared, always during the night. Your name was removed from the registers. Every record of everything you had ever done was wiped out. Your one-time existence was denied and then forgotten. You were abolished, annihilated. Vaporized was the usual word. For a moment, he was seized by a kind of hysteria. He began writing in a hurried, untidy scroll. They'll shoot me. I don't care. They'll shoot me in the back of the neck. I don't care. Down it, big brother. They always shoot you in the neck of your neck. In the back of your neck. I don't care. Down it, big brother. He sat back in his chair, slightly ashamed of himself, and laid down his pen. The next moment he started violently. There was a knocking at his door. Already? He sat as still as a mouse, in the fatal hope that whoever it was might go away after a single attempt. But no. The knocking was repeated. The worst thing of all would be to delay. His heart was thumping like a drum, but his face, from long habit, was probably expressionless. He got up and moved heavily toward the door.